Hello everyone! Before our colourful cast of characters ended up in the Constant, they all led pretty normal lives. Well, normal in a relative sense. But what exactly were each character getting up to in particular? And how did they arrive in the Constant? Let's find out. Some are obvious, and some might surprise you. We're not going to be going into too much detail about their lives before arriving in the Constant, just a quick rundown of their occupations and such. I'll save deep dives for more thorough individual spotlights in the future. Much like in the last video like this, we'll be starting with the characters that are more obvious and clear-cut, and work our way down to the more ambiguous ones as we go. Let me know if you know something I don't, or if you have your own headcanons. Let's start with Mr. Don't Starve himself, Wilson. Wilson is known as a gentleman scientist, so you would be led to believe he worked in the field of science? Well, not really. I mean, yes, he is still a scientist, but it was more of a title than a career path. Wilson attended university probably around his mid-20s, where thanks to a certain altercation within the university chemistry labs, was forced to walk away and pursue his own path of science. With this information, and with what's found in his laboratory as well as his insight tree, we can believe that he tried to pursue some form of chemistry, possibly even alchemy. However, he also references medical knowledge, and knowing how to perform amputations. Though, to be fair, I'm pretty sure even I could perform an amputation, just not a very good one. So it's safe to say before he made that portal, he was an aspiring amateur scientist, with probably zero qualifications. Willow was an orphan. Yeah, I know that's not really an occupation, but since Willow is depicted as being in her early 20s, it's very possible she was under care up until she became an adult, and was thrown to the streets. It's possible she was thrown to the streets even before she became an adult, with the whole burning orphanage thing that she did. She also, as a child, was a part of the Girl Scouts. Not officially, since in her own words, she crashed with them, hinting more to her troubled childhood and upbringing. We know very little of her young adulthood, but it's safe to say it probably wasn't comfortable, and possibly involved her being homeless for some time. Heck, even Willow herself thinks that coming to the Constant is the best thing to happen to her. Wickerbottom is known to all as a librarian, since that's what she kept herself busy with before coming to the Constant. It's unknown how long she worked as a librarian for, but she does mention and speak fondly of her bookmobile days. It's like a wagon full of books people used to cart around. The way she speaks so fondly of them makes it sound like it was from a time long ago, so either alluding to the fact she's been a librarian for a long time, or that she's been stuck in the Constant for so long. It's not impossible she's been a librarian for most of her life, but it's also possible she's had a few other jobs before settling as a librarian, though we have no ideas as of now. As for how she got into the Constant, well, a certain library fire caused by a certain somebody left her with little options of saving all of her knowledge, and then another certain somebody offered her a perfect place for it. Wolfgang worked at the circus in his iconic strongman role, but before that, did you know he probably did a fair few other jobs? One of those quote-unquote jobs involves possibly serving time in the military. This is alluded to with certain quotes, his guest of honor outfit being a military mess dress, and even a vignette mentioning Wolfgang's affinity for troops and troops. Could he have possibly even fought in the First World War? Don't Starve takes place around the 1920s, so it's possible that a lot of the cast may have had to take part in some form of military service. A thought for another time perhaps. Pitchforks and other such farming related stuff also hark back to a time on a farm as a child, so that's probably where his manual labour arc started strong. Woody was and still is a lumberjack. We know that he worked as a professional lumberjack for a certain thanks to a couple of his quotes referring to lumber yards, which are exactly what you expect they are. Yards where lumberjacks prepare and store lumber. Of course, this shouldn't be a shocking revelation. Other than that, he's not shared any word on whether he was known for anything else before arriving on the Constant. Oh yeah, except for possibly being afflicted by his curse before arriving here. Somehow. This is seen in Walter's animated short, and the fact that Walter knows about the werebeaver before even landing in the Constant. Speaking of Walter, Walter was a very prominent member of the Boy Scouts, specifically the Pine Tree Pioneers. Again, pretty obvious, I know. He accumulated many badges in his time, a lot of them around wilderness survival, which is incredibly convenient considering his circumstances. As we can also see in his animated short, he had a bit of a fascination with cryptids, specifically the aforementioned werebeaver. Such fascination might be the sole reason he ended up in the Constant to begin with. The same radio that probably brought Woody to the Constant was still running when he found his house. Wendy was just a young girl who liked to do all sorts of things, like reading, as well as whatever young girls get up to. With her sister, of course. But, something happened with her, I don't know if you knew that. We don't know the exact circumstances that Abigail passed, since we're never explicitly told why, but I don't think it's important. It's likely she had a desire for arts and other creative stuff too, since she breaks her stoic facade when inspecting things like the feather pencils and potter wheels. However, with the passing of her sister, she is worried that moving on from her death would make her memory fade from her. It's really tragic. At least she has Weber to keep her company. Which segues perfectly into Weber. We don't really know much about Weber's childhood, much like Wendy. He just seemed like your average, slightly mischievous boy, with a somewhat rooted interest in insects and bugs. Well, before the whole turning into a spider part. This was all thanks to his father having a deeper rooted interest in his work with Wagstaff than he did with his son, which, as you've seen in his animated short, is what led to him sabotaging his father's study, and in turn, ending up like this. In a bit of desperation to return normal, he was probably offered a deal by Maxwell to enter the Constant in exchange for a solution, and we all know how that ended up. Wily is in the same camp of is and was. He is a chef and was a chef. Not only a chef, but an aspiring sous chef in Paris. However, due to the declining health of his mother Angeline, he chose to return home to care for her, and spent his time there trying to do all he could to have her remember him. This is really sad. He also mentions owning a goat at one point, so he possibly could have had a time on his life where he worked on or adjacent to a farm, or simply just looked after one because he wanted to. One of his battle cries also mentions the fact he is an accomplished butcher, so he could have worked as one for a while, but it could also simply be a part of his chef days. However, as with most of the characters trapped on the Constant, they heard a certain somebody's voice on the radio, with most likely the same promises he offered everyone else. Well, he can't catch a break, can he? Maxwell. Oh boy, the former primary antagonist himself. Before he became the survivor like the rest of us, he ruled the Constant himself, shaping a lot of the environment and creatures to his liking, some of which to his disliking too. He used his influence to drag a lot of the other survivors to the Constant as well, to be pawns in his sick little game. However, as we know now, he may not have been in full control as much as we were led on, thanks to the sorry state we find him in at the epilogue of Adventure Mode. Could they be simply using Maxwell as a pawn in their twisted games? And by them, I mean them. But before all of that, before he even came to the Constant in the first place, Maxwell was an amateur magician from London who went by the name William Carter, brother to Jack Carter, the father of Wendy. His performances weren't the most captivating to his audiences, but after he moved from England to the United States and found a certain special book, he skyrocketed to new heights as a performer, even finding himself a partner for his shows, who would later up being the new primary antagonist. Under the new title of The Amazing Maxwell, he would perform, showcasing his aptitude with shadow magic, until that one fateful night where everything went wrong, and he ended up in the Constant himself. What happened after that is a mystery, for now. Winona is the big sister of Charlie, the big evil monster that lives in the dark trying to eat us, and also known as the Queen of the Constant. Before Winona ended up in the Constant, however, she worked her life as a labourer, most notably in one of Wagstaff's Vuxola factories. Whilst doing this, she was thorough on her search for her sister ever since she went missing, dedicating a lot of her time and effort into finding out where she went. It's possible her job at Vuxola was solely so she could track Charlie down. However, from her personality in quotes, it seems like she's always been hard-working her entire life. But her job at the factory is what ultimately led her right down to what she was looking for, and helped her end up right in Charlie's domain. WX-78 is another pretty big character in the lore. They keep their history and any and all of their quotes hidden. This is most likely due to the whole transhumanism aspect, and wanting to forget their life as a worthless organic. Before they were known as a serial number, they worked with the secondary antagonist Robert Wagstaff in their laboratory together. Their relationship left a lot to be desired, as in WX's animated short they're seen arguing a lot, and Wagstaff is even seen destroying some parts that seemingly look related to WX's chassis. What drove this rift between them is unknown, but it was enough for them to have a large fight at one point, that ended in Wagstaff sending WX themselves to the Constant, making them one of few characters that wasn't enticed by Maxwell and arrived on other terms. This vitriol is still carried over in WX's quotes to this day. I know WX is seen as an evil robot, but I have suspicions that Wagstaff is the instigator here. Let me know what you think about that down below. Speaking of characters that avoid talking about their past life, we have Wigfrid. All of her quotes and interactions in-game almost never break character, so there's not much we can gauge from them. However, in her animated short we can see that she was, or possibly used to be, a renowned actress, taking on the role as the Valkyrie. This fame was enough to afford her a life of seemingly luxury as seen from her rather fancy looking house. However, as some rather distasteful headlines in local tabloids allude to, she might have been somewhat washed up, or no longer in her heyday. This aspiration for more fame and glory was enough for Maxwell to entice her, in his own words, making her make headlines once more. Let's look at Wes now. We have absolutely nothing to learn from his quotes since he ain't got any, but we do have a few details from his short and skin descriptions. We can see that, as you would expect, he worked as a performer on the streets of Paris. Not the most well-paying job for him, but it was seemingly enough to keep him clothed and painted for his role as a mime. Also in the description of his verdant skin, he's said to be a painter, so he most likely went to some art or even performance school, which is possibly how he ended up becoming a mime. He seemed to be a very kind and caring person as well, helping out both inadvertently and intentionally. However, helping Witherstone's daughter get her doll back is exactly what got him in the Constant to begin with. Not for any serious reasons, but because he accidentally bumped into Witherstone himself, and took his place as a pawn of the Constant. This displeased Maxwell so much that he imprisoned Wes even more so, as can be seen in Adventure Mode. We'll talk about Witherstone and his role in a future video, since this isn't his first and only appearance. Wanda is up next, a character with a backstory I want to explore so badly, but alas, we don't have much to go off unfortunately. It's safe to assume she was some form of clockmaker or tinkerer before she found herself in possession of some clockwork pieces she shouldn't. We have no idea how she got these, but we do know the effect it had on her, dooming her to a constant life of cat and mouse, being chased by nightmares and a rapidly approaching demise thanks to old age. During one such chase, she found herself in the Constant with her way out destroyed, leaving her trapped here. Was she able to travel to and from the Constant before one of her watches broke? Could she still do that? I have a lot of theories I'd like to explore. Let me know if you'd want to hear them. And those are all of the characters that are not native to the Constant in Don't Starve Together. However, that's not all of the characters in Don't Starve Together. We're still going to explore the backstories of the Constant natives to see what their life was like before becoming one of the survivors. Let's start with everyone's favourite dog, Wormwood. Wormwood is possibly the oldest or youngest survivor in the game depending on how you look at it. He was born from a rock that fell from the moon, who we now know as Alta. The rock landed among some vines in the jungle temple found on the same land masses that Hamlet takes place. It's unknown what magic birthed this form, or even how he got from Hamlet to the forest with the rest of the survivors, but one thing's for certain, his connection to Alta is more than he lets on. The biggest clue for this is that Wormwood is the only character in the game that knows how to solve the puzzles in the ancient archive, almost definitely due to his connection with Alta. Wartox was once a little goat. It's not known what goat creature he was exactly, since there's no other creature in the forest part of the Constant that resembles him at all. I personally feel like he's from an unknown part of the Constant, like the Quagmire where the Gorge takes place, for example. His life as a sweet little goat was short-lived, as after a disagreement and altercation with his friend Krampus, he ended up absorbing his soul and taking on his red form. This does raise a few questions. Does this imply that Wartox's soul-stealing abilities were independent from his transformation with Krampus? Was he able to teleport across dimensions, but just needed an event like this to unlock it? I really hope in the future we can explore more of exactly what Wartox is. And last, but absolutely not least, we have my child, Wirt. She's a small little Mermguard, specifically a Mermguard, look at her horns, that resided in the marshes of the Constant for as long as we know. At some point, a connection between her and the survivors were formed, most possibly after the Monster Mash short, and she became hospitable and cooperative with most other survivors. How she was able to do this is unknown fully, since most other Merms are unable to communicate with humans. I personally have the theory that Wirt is a first-generation Merm, one that wasn't transformed from a goat person due to the Moor's influence. In case you forgot, the Moor is the weird big sky mouth that you have to feed in the Gorge event. I should do a video about that at some point, and the lore surrounding it. This separation from the Moor's curse is most likely what gives her liberty and freedom in her choices, and a heightened level of intelligence. Relatively speaking, at least. This is also somewhat backed up by the unused gorge quotes for work found in the game's files. There's a lot of unused quotes in this game that I should really take a deep dive at. But it doesn't matter what these characters once were, what matters now is what they do with the life they've been given, and the friends alongside them. Will they ever return to their life outside of the Constant? Sans the native characters, of course. Only time will tell. For now though, I thank all of you for watching and enjoying this new style of video I'm trying out. Let me know if I've got anything wrong, skipped any details, or if there's anything you would add. Stay loved everybody, and take care. Bye bye.